My wide eyes stare back at the eyes that barely contain their enthusiasm. This cop slow day just got real exciting. Hey there, my friends. Thank you for starting this episode. This is episode 23. It's the conclusion to my time in Denver. This one it's a little bit longer than I usually like to make them, and I apologize for that, but there's just a lot that needs to be added and said in this final story, so please watch it all, see the conclusion of what happens to me and how God had to all but step in to get me home because I almost did not leave. So here we go. I left off last time with Adam and I about to get tossed in the back of a cop car. We've been in this parking lot for 2 hours smoking an absurd amount of meth. I'm going to make this scene for you. I'm gonna drag this out a little bit. Let my dramatic side come out, my rusty dramatic side. As the noxious meth smoke billows from my trembling lips, I keep the staring contest going with the cop. Thing is, he's not moving. His lights aren't even turned on. He's just sitting there, watching to see what I'm gonna do next. I hit Adam's arm, hit him, get his attention, but Adam is just spaced out, looking at the birds flying, whatever, completely not paying attention to what's happening on the other side of the car. He turns around and sees what's happening. He's now really, really focused. Agonizing seconds tick away with nothing happening. Nobody's moving. The staring contest continues. Finally, I decide to put the car in reverse and back out on my spot. This game of chicken that I was foolishly playing with the cop just got real. Most likely furious by my brazen attitude, the cop finally turns on his lights, leaves his spot, and cuts off my hasty retreat. He jumps out of his car, gun drawn. I slam on the brakes, put it in park, and Adam in my hands, we reach the ceiling, and we just stay there frozen. Terror. Oh man, terror. Cop comes over, gun still pointing, and takes my keys. It was about this time that 2 more squad cars show up, as well as an unmarked DEA officer car shows up. The 2 new cops, they wrangle us out, cuff us, and drop us on the curb as people are walking around us going in and out of the department store, enjoying the drama happening right in front of them. The original cop and the DEA officer, they begin going through my car as Adam and I sit quietly on the curb. Adam only looks down, dejected, knowing he's going to jail. I, for some reason, sit up straight, my hands cuffed behind my back, and watch the whole scene play out. I promise you, this is not a look of defiance or cockiness or arrogance, but in reality, it's a look of relief. I swear it was. God was obviously beginning the process of restoring me, even if it meant to spend some time in the slammer first. By now, I was so past the point of being sick of the life that I was living. I was sick of the drugs. I was sick of the scene that came with the drugs. I just wanted to go home. But it looked like I was going to need to make a stop in prison first before I got there. I vividly remember the original cop just kept looking curiously over at me. I was completely calm and accepting of the situation. I also vividly remember the growing frustration on his face. There was nothing left of that large quantity of meth that Adam and I had been smoking. If the cop had found us 2 hours ago, he had a respectable bust. Now, all he had was paraphernalia, which is barely a ticket. And besides, I bought that pipe that Adam and I were smoking from at a completely legal Denver head shop. This frustrated cop knew he had nothing but pointless paperwork waiting for him. Also, the cop had found my military ID in my wallet. So, as the DA officer and the other 2 cops are eventually, after they left, the original cop begrudgingly eventually came over to us. He stands me up, but he leaves my cuffs on and gets right in my face like a drill sergeant and starts pelting me with all these questions. He asked what I did in the military. I told him I was a cop. He then tells me, he's informing me, that I have 0 infractions on my record. I say nothing. He then says something I will never forget. He says, "You have no record and you were in the military police. What's your problem, Jones?" I tell him I lost my way, but thankfully, this incident has woken me up. I'm going to head back to home, back to New York. I'm going to get myself squared away. He's like, "That's a good idea. but you need to stick around for at least a couple weeks just in case we need to ask you more questions. I promise him that I will. With that, he spins me around, takes off my cuffs, and hands my keys back to me. He then walks over to Adam, uncuffs him, tells us we're free to go. He gets in his car and leaves us. Adam and I are just standing there on the curb. People are coming and going to the department store, utterly befuddled by what just happened. We assumed we should be, downtown getting processed and getting our fingerprints put into record. Instead, I have keys in my hand, and I'm told that we can go. We decided it'd be unwise to stick around. We better get going while we still can. The crazy thing is, as I told you in another story, that cop really did have a major bust on his hands, and he didn't know it. Adam had access to some major players in the Denver drug scene, not to mention a few people in Phoenix and Chicago as well. But this cop let us go. Too late now. Or is it? All right, I said last time that this story is going to be the last one. I need to wrap it up. I need to get going here. So there are some important details I need to tell as I'm setting up my final month in the Rocky Mountains. The next day after almost getting arrested, I call my mom. I tell her that, Mom, I'm finally coming home. She tells me she's happy, but she'll believe it when she actually sees it, because during this time, my family knew what I was into, and on more than one occasion, I called home. I told them, I'm so sorry, I'm coming home, I promise, but I always would flake and back out of it. I would always go back to what I said. My childhood church was praying for me. Pretty much everyone knew what was going on. I said, Mom, I understand. I completely validated her concerns, but I assured her, I'm serious this time. I'm coming home. Let me ask one small favor of you. She's like, what? I said, please call me back. Call me every week and remind me of this conversation until I'm home. Because if you don't, I'm afraid I'm going to flake out again and back out. So, okay. So that was it. I'd given myself 1 month. That was the timetable. I'm not sure if it was right after I got off the phone with her, but very soon after that, I was just emboldened with this adrenaline rush of trying to escape the prison I was in. I got right to work, put everything in place to make sure that I truly was getting home in a month. I knew in the back of my mind I was going to be bombarded by endless temptations to stick around. So I purposed in my mind that I need to tackle this last month just like I used to tackle all my sports and my military training days. I could not allow anything to stop me, no matter how tired I was. The other interesting thing is I started praying for the first time in forever. I have no idea, at least a year. So the first thing on my agenda was I needed a job. All those great temp jobs I had working for Janus Mutual Funds and a couple other really cool temp jobs, it was over. So I was back to being unemployed again. So I started looking through the want ads, and I told myself that the first job that gets offered to me and also is willing to pay me $10 an hour, I will take it no matter what. I needed to be able to start saving up for my escape. Well, that one and only job offer I got was loss prevention officer at the J.C. Penney's in that same swanky mall I used to valet at, which was very interesting to me. It was kind of full circle. I have so many amazing, cool stories from that time doing loss prevention. I wish I could tell them, but like I said, I need to get rolling. Thing is, I had not told April or her family yet that I was leaving. I knew they would do all they could to stop me, including her parents, because her parents had 3 girls, no sons. I had become kind of a surrogate son to them. They loved me. They adored me. They had made me one of their own, and they really, really wanted April and I to get married. So I knew I needed to tell them at the last second. However, I started telling my party friends that, no, I'm leaving, but I need you to promise me you're going to keep it a secret and don't tell April. Let me tell her at my time. Unfortunately, one of them did not keep their secret. I vividly remember being just roused out of sleep early one morning by April in my face screaming at me. She just got off the phone with a friend and she was demanding to know what is going on. Am I really leaving? This morning quickly turned into a very tense and tearful morning. I tried really hard in vain to explain to her that I had to go. I'm like, April, be honest with yourself. This is not going to end well. At the very least, I'm going to end up in jail, but most likely I'm going to end up dead. Didn't matter. She couldn't understand why I was abandoning her. Argument was going nowhere, so she decided she's going to leave, and she was going to come back for the rest of the day. So we spent the whole day away from each other. She spent the entire day at one of our mutual friends' houses and just cried and talked to him. And when she left his house, she came back with a different attitude. His advice to her was, obviously my mind was made up and I was leaving no matter what. So she had two choices she could make. She could either waste our last time together being furious with me, or she could make the most memorable 2 weeks possible. Thankfully, she chose the latter. And there's a lot of stories I wanted to tell of our last couple weeks together. They were really fun stories, but the stories already be super long. So I just narrowed it down to one story. There was a famous insane asylum that had been shut down and abandoned for many years out in the Denver area. Even though it was no longer functioning, all the buildings were still intact. This was a very well-known place for ghost hunters because the demonic activity at this place was pretty intense. The reason why is because it was a favorite place for occultists and wicked type people to hang out and practice all their dark stuff. So it was a haven. It was an absolute haven. Since April grew up in Denver, she's always known about this place, but she never had the courage to actually go check it out for herself. So her and I and a bunch of our friends, we got together and decided we're going to go drive out there one night and hang out. So we got there at about 10 p.m. We snuck onto the campus, and I'm telling you right now, as soon as we jumped over the fence and got into this campus, the oppressive feeling that hit us was undeniable. It was like this heavy, dark blanket that just kind of was smothering us. The years of evil that had been taking place, that had gone on at this place, were pretty obvious. So we found our way into the lobby of the main building, but once we got inside, like the hallway to get into the rest of the building from the lobby was boarded up, sealed tight. However, at some point over the years of people breaking in, a giant hole was made in the concrete wall, and that's how people were getting in and out through the entire buildings through this giant hole. Somebody had spray painted this kind of grotesque demon face around the hole so that the hole was actually the demon's mouth. You had to literally get on your hands and knees and crawl through this demon's mouth to get inside. What a start to this place. So now, once we're inside, the spookiness is even more intense inside than it was outside. We eventually found the gymnasium and found that the center court, the basketball jump circle, that big circle there, had been spray painted to a pentagram. There were also Ouija board boxes everywhere. The gym was so creepy. The whole building is creepy. So as we worked our way through all the different buildings, you could just feel, as I'm telling you, I almost could feel it, the neck hair standing on the back of your neck. It was just this intense feeling that you always felt like you were being followed, or at the very least watched. Like every room you went past, there was just an unseen spirit in there just kind of watching you go by, curiously watching you. It was just so terrifying. I vividly remember being mad at April because it felt like I was dragging her everywhere we went. I held her hand the whole time, but just felt like she was dead weight. I had to fighting with her. Come on, let's go. And I kept telling her, would you stop dragging your feet? You're making this way too hard. But she never said anything. She just kind of looked at me with these terror-filled eyes and pale face. Just couldn't say anything to me. Afterwards, we went to check out all the buildings, and we had enough. We all went our separate ways. April and I went back to our car, and at that moment, she finally started talking to me. She hadn't talked to me the entire time we were there. She starts apologizing to me, explaining what was going on, that she was not doing this on purpose, but that something was constantly holding her arm. She would we're moving forward. She's trying to here's her hand, but she would look back and her arm was like this, like something was grabbing onto her arm, trying to pull her into the shadows, to pull her away from me. Do what you want with that story. I'm making none of it up, okay? All right, that's the one story I wanted to tell. I need to start wrapping things up here. As I said, I knew that there's going to be some people that are going to make it really hard for me to leave. I did not expect April's parents to make it the hardest. They were so furious with me for abandoning them and their daughter. But I remember sitting outside on the front steps with her mom, telling her, I'm like, I can't even take care of myself. How can I possibly take care of your daughter? And she's like, this is not the way to do it. You do not run away. You stay, and you and April get into rehab and you work this out together. You don't leave us. Full court press almost every day. Thankfully, eventually, they stopped. They just accepted it, but they were furious with me for the entire time I was there. Here we are, the eve of my escape had finally come. Everything was in place. My car was pretty much packed. I had somehow scraped together $200 for my trip back. $200 is a reason for that amount. I never told you this before in any of the other stories, but in my 3 years of Denver, the two first summers, I made trips back to New York to visit my family for about a week and then drove back. I figured out that, the amount of money I needed for gas for a one-way trip was about $200. That's how much money I had. So there was no wiggle room. I bought a loaf of bread and some peanut butter and jelly, and that was going to be my meals for the 33-hour trip back. I obviously couldn't afford it to eat out. I also needed to stop one night and get a hotel room. I tried doing that trip back without stopping once, and it was really, really, really hard. So I called my dad. I begged him to loan me some money for the hotel, and I would pay him back as soon as I could when we got home. The plan was I was going to call him whenever I got to whatever hotel, and have him give his credit card over the phone to the clerk, the desk clerk. I also planned for my final night in Denver to be as epic as I could possibly make it. April and we scraped together as much and as many different kinds of drugs as we could. I'm assuming that our plan was to do enough drugs to kill a horse, because we had enough drugs to kill a horse. Also, the plan was we were going to hang out at Adam's mom's apartment for our last night and one of our other friends. At this point, our inner circle is to about 4. April and I, Adam, and this other friend of ours. We hung out at Adam's mom's apartment all the time because her and Adam's stepfather were also drug addicts, so they could absolutely care less what we were doing in his room. They were busy doing their own drugs in the living room anyway. So we picked that place because we knew it'd be the most chill spot we could hang out for our last time there. So we hung out, we talked and we laughed, we played video games and just told stories and just listened to music and did an absurd amount of drugs. And time finally came. We needed to get home for our curfew, and tearful hugs were enjoyed as I said goodbye to those two friends. And I still, as I'm telling the story, I can remember that scene. It was sad, but it wasn't the saddest goodbye. That was still coming. April and I, we drove home, and we did not sleep a wink that night. I'm not trying to give unnecessary details, because this is necessary detail to go in with the next story, but we stayed up and we saved aside a whole pile of meth for her and I to do back home, because we just did not want to waste one of our precious seconds left together wasting on sleeping. So we stayed up all night. Morning came. We're now in my car. It's inching away towards 11 o'clock. 11 o'clock was the time that I said I was going to leave. So we're sitting in my car smoking our last cigarette together. April was at a settled repose at this point because she knew this was the end. I, however, was a total basket case. Now that the moment arrived, I was terrified to face going home. I knew the withdrawals from my drugs and the immense effort of repairing the damage I'd caused everybody was going to be all-consuming. I was terrified to face it. So, as we reached the butts of our cigarettes and my car clock was 10:59, click, 11, April got out of her car. Got out of the car, and, she got out, and the pit in my stomach was just out of control. It was starting to engulf me, basically. I got out of my car. I got out of the car, my driver's side, and walked around the back to give her one final last goodbye hug. We hugged for a little bit. And then she pulled away. She was living in a neighborhood where you had, a main, sidewalk, and then another sidewalk that went right up the middle of her yard that led directly to her front door. So we broke from our hug. She turned. We both went our separate ways. I was ready to start walking to the driver's side to leave, and she was starting to walk towards the sidewalk. I am never going to forget this next moment to the day I die. I could probably have dementia and still not forget this moment, only because it was so unbelievably powerful and terrifyingly evil. The evil that descended on this moment, I don't know what to say with it. As she turned to walk away, and as I turned to walk away, I 100% involuntarily reached back and grabbed her wrist. Grabbed it, vice-like grip, and stopped her. I had no control over my actions. It was like something else was making me do this. I didn't want to leave. I wanted to stay. I was doing all I could to anchor myself to April. It isn't because it was just a girl. April represented everything, all of Denver. Everything that I loved about Denver was into one package, and that was her. I've said this many times before. Our relationship was so unnatural and demonically powerful. And in this moment, it was all coming out and heaping buckets of last-ditch effort. Another thing I'm never going to forget is the calm look on her face. All her tears had already been cried. She was ready to say goodbye. She wanted to begin the healing. So here we are. I'm looking at her. She's looking at me. She looks down at my hand, and then she looks up at me, and she says calmly, "Let me go, Jeremy." We held this staring contest for a few seconds. I'm just like trembling, just trembling. I'm like everything in me is about to explode. I couldn't do it. I could not let go of her wrist. It was death-like vice grip, like a dying, drowning person. God, he released. Whatever, that's all I can say, because I had no willpower to let go. It was God that broke the grip that I had on her wrist. As soon as I let go, she went right up to her sidewalk. I ran to my driver's side door, jumped in the car, and almost Dukes of Hazzard style just drove away as fast as I could. I had to get out of there. The flood of tears and agony that washed over me was so intense and so overpowering, I felt like I was drowning. Very few times in my life have I ever cried such anguish-soaked tears like that before. I also felt like a tsunami was following me and was about to wash me out to sea if I didn't get the heck out of Dodge immediately. Once I got a few miles away and I was starting to a little bit calm down, I took that moment to quickly smoke some pot. I knew I needed to. I had planned this ahead of time. I knew that moment that if I didn't get super stoned, I was going to wuss out, turn around, and go back to April. By God's mercy and grace, I never did. And it wasn't the pot. It was God empowering me to keep going. I also never saw April again. Next time, I'm going to tell my trip. God did some amazing things, even on the trip home from my prodigal son journey. As I said in the beginning, I'm sorry this is so long. This was just a really important moment in my life of my finally leaving Denver. I needed to take more time. I'm sorry about that. And as I like to always do, I like to just try to shine the light on Jesus. For those who've seen all these stories, you've heard me say it a million times, so I'm just going to remind you, go to my website. There are links on there that explain how Jesus can restore and repair and, most importantly, save your wayward life. Please go back and look at those links. And then come back and hear episode 24 and hear just in the journey home, God had to do so many things just to get me home. Okay, my friends, thank you so much. Until we talk again, keep pressing on.